The judge lifted one of my medals between two fingers and laughed. "People buy these online every day," he said. "Did you really think this court wouldn't notice?" A few people behind me chuckled. My brother's attorney leaned back with a satisfied smile, as if the custody hearing had already ended. I said nothing. Then, the phone inside Judge Halpern's chambers began ringing. His clerk stepped through the side door, pale and breathless. "Your Honor, you need to take this." "I'm in session." "It's the Pentagon, sir. Secure verification desk." The laughter stopped. Judge Halpern disappeared into his chambers. Less than a minute later, he returned without the medal in his hand. He looked directly at me. "Colonel Mercer," he said carefully, "they asked me to confirm whether anyone in this courtroom used the name Nightingale." Across the aisle, my brother stopped smiling. That name had not been spoken in 12 years. And it was never supposed to appear in a civilian court. 3 days earlier, I was standing in my brother's kitchen in Arlington, Virginia, watching steam gather on the inside of a coffee mug no one had offered me. Outside, late November rain tapped against the windows. The neighborhood looked polished and expensive brick townhouses, trimmed hedges, black SUVs resting beneath bare maple trees. Inside, the air smelled of cinnamon candles and the roast chicken my sister-in-law had ordered for dinner. Nothing in that house felt like family. My brother Daniel sat at the head of the table with one hand resting on a leather folder. His wife, Brooke, stood behind him, turning her wedding ring around her finger. "You should make this easy," Daniel said. I looked at the folder but did not touch it. The hearing was about our father. After his stroke, Dad could still speak, still read, and still make decisions on good days. But Daniel had petitioned for full guardianship, claiming Dad was confused and unsafe. What the petition did not mention was that Daniel had already contacted a real estate developer about selling the farmhouse in Loudoun County. The house had been in our family for 63 years. More importantly, Dad had told me he did not want to leave it. "I'm not fighting you," I said. Daniel gave a tired laugh. "That's exactly what someone says before dragging the family into court." Brooke placed a glass of wine beside him. "You've been gone most of your adult life, Claire. Daniel has been here." I noticed she said here, "not with him." On the counter behind her sat Dad's old prescription organizer. 3 compartments were still full, though Daniel had told the court Dad could not manage his medication. I looked away before either of them noticed. Daniel opened the folder and slid a document toward me. "Sign this. Agree that I should manage Dad's finances and medical care. We avoid a public hearing." "And the farmhouse?" "That isn't the issue," which meant it was. I read the first page slowly. Near the bottom was a clause allowing Daniel to sell property without further consent if the court found it financially necessary. "You already have a buyer," I said. Brooke's fingers stopped moving around her ring. Daniel's voice hardened. "You always did enjoy pretending you knew more than everyone else." I closed the folder. "I won't sign." For a moment, only the rain answered. Then Daniel stood, walked to the hall closet, and returned carrying a dented black case. I recognized it immediately. Dad had kept it beneath his bed since I came home. Daniel set it on the table and opened the lid. Inside lay 4 medals, a pair of silver wings, and a folded American flag patch with its edges worn nearly white. Brooke leaned closer. "These are what she showed Dad," Daniel said. "This is how she convinced him she was some kind of military hero." I kept my hands in my lap. He lifted the wings. "There's almost nothing about her service online. No interviews, no articles, no ceremony photographs, just vague records and sealed pages." "They're not for you," I said. Daniel smiled. "No, they're for the judge." He had found the one thing Dad had promised never to hand over. And he believed it would make me look like a liar. What Daniel did not know was that one of those medals had never been listed in my public record. It had been awarded under another name. A name only 7 living people were still authorized to use. I drove from Daniel's townhouse to the rehabilitation center in Reston, with both hands fixed on the steering wheel. The rain followed me west. By the time I reached the parking lot, evening had settled over the low brick building. White lights reflected across the wet pavement, making every empty space look deeper than it was. Dad was awake when I entered his room. Robert Mercer had once been broad enough to fill a doorway. He had repaired farm equipment, built fences without measuring twice, and carried 50-pound feed sacks as if they were pillows. After the stroke, the left side of his body moved more slowly. His words sometimes arrived in the wrong order, but his eyes were still his. Sharp, patient, hard to fool. "You saw Daniel," he said. It was not a question. I placed my coat over the chair. "He wants me to support the guardianship petition." Dad looked toward the window. Outside, rainwater crawled down the glass in crooked lines. "He wants the farm." "I know." His jaw tightened. Daniel had told the evaluator that Dad repeated himself, forgot appointments, and once left a burner on. All three things were true. What Daniel had left out was that the burner incident happened the morning after Dad's stroke symptoms began. He had also left out the notebook beside Dad's bed, where every appointment, medication, and bill was written in Dad's careful block letters. I picked it up. That day's page had the date, the names of both nurses, the time of his physical therapy session, and a note reminding him that the Washington Nationals had traded a relief pitcher he disliked. A confused man might write a date incorrectly. A confused man did not complain accurately about bullpen management. "Did you give Daniel the medal case?" I asked. Dad shook his head. "Closet." "He took it from the farmhouse?" Another slow nod. I lowered my eyes to the notebook. The medals had never been displayed. Dad kept them in the black case beneath a stack of winter blankets. He had shown them to me only twice since I returned to Virginia. The first time, he simply opened the case and said, "Your mother would have understood eventually." The second time was after his stroke, when he placed his good hand over mine and whispered, "You don't have to explain yourself to Daniel." I had believed him, but part of me had still hoped Daniel would ask. Not about the medals, about the years before them, about why I stopped sleeping through the night, why I always chose a chair facing the door, why the sound of helicopter blades on television made my fingers search for controls that were no longer there. Daniel never asked those questions. He only asked why my service record looked incomplete. "He'll use them in court," I said. Dad's mouth pulled slightly to one side. "Let him. You don't understand." "I understand enough." He struggled to lift his left hand, then let it rest again. "He thinks quiet means empty." The words came slowly, but they landed cleanly. I sat beside him. For most of my life, I had believed quiet was how you protected people. When our mother died, Daniel was 22, and I was 18. He stayed in Virginia, finished business school, and helped Dad keep the farm through 2 bad harvests. I left 6 weeks after the funeral. That was the version Daniel repeated. Claire left. Daniel stayed. The rest of the story rarely survived the first sentence. Before she died, Mom had made me promise that I would report to the Air Force Academy preparatory program I had worked 3 years to enter. She knew I planned to give it up. She also knew Dad would never ask me to stay, even if losing both of us at once broke something inside him. At the funeral, Daniel heard me tell Dad I was leaving. He did not hear Dad answer. "Go before grief chooses your whole life for you." So I went. For years, I carried Daniel's anger as if it were another piece of issued equipment, heavy, familiar, and easier to keep than to examine. I graduated. I earned my wings. I learned to fly rescue aircraft through weather that grounded safer people. I learned that fear could sit beside training without canceling it. I learned how to speak calmly while alarms sounded and someone's fuel gauge dropped toward 0. What I never learned was how to explain any of it at Thanksgiving dinner. Daniel built a career in commercial real estate. He married Brooke. He sent holiday cards with matching sweaters and professionally arranged photographs. I sent Dad postcards from bases without return addresses. Sometimes security rules required that. Sometimes shame did. My last operational deployment had ended 12 years earlier in a mountain valley that did not appear in any public citation attached to my name. The mission began after midnight. A joint team had been cut off during an extraction. Weather closed over the ridgeline before the first rescue aircraft could reach them. 2 crews turned back after taking fire and losing visual contact with the landing zone. We went in on the 3rd attempt. My crew called me Nightingale because I kept my voice low when everything around us became loud. It started as a joke during training. Later, men I outranked used the name over secure radio channels because hearing it meant someone was still coming. That night, we brought 11 people out. The official summary said the mission had been completed under extreme conditions. It did not say how many times we were told to abort. It did not describe the medic kneeling behind my seat, pressing both hands against a wound while telling me not to climb too fast. It did not name the person we left on the mountain. Captain Elena Ruiz had been my flight surgeon and my closest friend. She left the aircraft to reach an injured operator 30 yards beyond the extraction point. The slope shifted under incoming fire. Visibility disappeared. We circled until our fuel warning became continuous. Then command ordered me home. For years, I heard that order whenever a room became quiet. Return to base. That was the part of the mission Daniel could never have found online. It was also why I stopped correcting people who assumed I had spent my career behind a desk. A desk sounded peaceful. A desk did not carry Elena's final transmission. Dad watched me for a long moment. "You're back there," he said. I closed the notebook. No, it was a lie, but a gentle one. A nurse entered with his evening medication. Her name was Tanya, and she had worked with Dad since his first week at the center. She handed him the cup, but did not place the pills in his mouth. Dad checked each tablet against the list in his notebook before taking them. Tanya waited without rushing him. Daniel's petition claimed Dad could no longer understand his own medical treatment. I watched him identify every pill. "Miss Mercer," Tanya said as she adjusted the blanket. "The court investigator came by again." Dad looked at me. "What investigator?" "A woman named Evelyn Shaw," Tanya said. "She asked whether your father recognizes family members and can express his preferences consistently." "What did you tell her?" "The truth." Tanya glanced toward Dad. "He has difficulty speaking when he's tired. That isn't the same as not knowing what he wants." Dad tapped the notebook with one finger. "Show her." "I did," Tanya said. That was the first thing Daniel had failed to control. The second came the following morning. Evelyn Shaw called me at 7:40 while I was standing in Dad's farmhouse kitchen. The house smelled faintly of dust, coffee grounds, and the cedar blocks Dad kept in the cupboards. Daniel had already removed several framed photographs from the hallway, pale rectangles marked where they had hung. I noticed the curtains had changed. Mom had sewn the old ones from blue cotton. Brooke had replaced them with white linen panels that looked ready for a real estate listing. "Miss Mercer," Evelyn said, "your brother's counsel submitted additional evidence last night. The medals." There was a pause. "Yes. He says they're fraudulent. He says you used false military claims to influence your father's financial decisions." I looked through the window toward the lower field. A developer's survey flag stood near the fence. Bright orange. New. "Has the court verified his claim?" I asked. "That process has begun." "How?" "Judge Halpern's clerk contacted the Air Force Personnel Records Center. They confirmed part of your service, but several entries are restricted. That doesn't make them false." "I'm aware." Her voice remained professional, but something beneath it had changed. "Your brother also submitted a photograph of one decoration that does not appear on the record released to him." I knew which one. It was smaller than the distinguished flying cross beside it. The ribbon was faded where Dad's thumb had touched it over the years. The public citation attached to it contained only 3 sentences and no operational location. "What exactly did the Records Center say?" I asked. "They would not discuss it with me. They referred the inquiry to the Department of Defense." I leaned against the kitchen counter. Daniel thought the missing information proved the medal was fake. He had no idea what door he had opened. "Miss Shaw," I said, "this hearing is supposed to determine whether my father needs a guardian." "It is." "Then why are my decorations relevant?" "They should not be, unless they relate to credibility or coercion." "And do they?" "I haven't decided." I respected the answer because she did not soften it. Before ending the call, she asked one more question. "Do you know a retired Chief Master Sergeant named Marcus Vale?" My fingers tightened around the phone. "Yes. Your father listed him as an emergency contact." Dad had never mentioned that. Marcus Vale had served as the senior pararescueman on my last deployment. He was the man who strapped himself to the open cabin floor while we pulled survivors aboard. He was also the last person to see Elena alive. I had not spoken to him in 9 years. "Has he been contacted?" I asked. "He requested permission to attend the hearing." "Why?" "He said your father called him 2 weeks before the stroke." After we hung up, I walked into Dad's bedroom. The winter blankets had been pulled from the closet. The space beneath them was empty. On the nightstand sat an old landline telephone and a yellow notepad. Dad had written one name 3 times. Marcus Vale. Beneath it, in smaller letters, he had written, "If Daniel makes her prove it." I sat on the edge of the bed. Dad had known. He knew Daniel would turn my silence into evidence against me. He knew I would rather lose the argument than open the sealed part of my life in a public courtroom. So he had called the one man who could speak when I could not. That afternoon, Daniel arrived at the farmhouse without knocking. Brooke followed him, carrying a cardboard box and wearing shoes too clean for the muddy driveway. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Collecting Dad's medical records." "You don't have authority." "Neither do you." Not yet. His eyes moved to the yellow notepad in my hand. I folded it once and slipped it into my coat pocket. Brooke set the box on the kitchen table. Inside were silverware bundles, framed photographs, and Mom's old recipe books. "You're packing the house," I said. "We're organizing," she replied. "The hearing hasn't happened." Daniel walked to the counter and picked up the developer's brochure I had found beside the telephone. The cover showed rows of luxury homes beneath the words, Ridgeview Estates. "You've already negotiated a price," I said. He did not deny it. "Dad's care will cost money. The farm generates lease income." "Not enough." "Then show the court the accounts." His expression changed. Only slightly, but I had spent too many years reading frightened faces in bad weather to miss it. There was something in the accounts he did not want examined. Brooke stepped between us. "This is why Daniel stayed and you didn't. He handles real problems. You arrive after 30 years and act like being mysterious makes you important." "I don't think I'm important." Daniel laughed. "Then why keep these?" He reached into his briefcase and removed the black metal case. He placed it on the table between us. "You could end this," he said. "Admit you exaggerated your career, support the guardianship, then go back to whatever quiet little life you built." I looked at the worn flag patch inside the case. Elena had sewn one corner after it tore. "You believe the medals are fake?" I asked. "I believe real heroes don't hide." For a second, I could smell hydraulic fluid, cold mountain air, burned wiring. Then the farmhouse kitchen returned. I closed the case. "Real heroes hide all the time, Daniel." He mistook the softness of my voice for surrender. At the hearing 2 days later, he arrived with 3 attorneys, a financial consultant, and a prepared statement describing me as unstable, absent, and dishonest. Dad was brought in by wheelchair. Tanya came with him. Evelyn Shaw sat behind the court clerk, with Dad's notebook resting beside her report. Marcus Vale took a seat in the back row wearing a plain gray suit. His hair had turned white. A narrow scar ran from his ear to his collar. He did not greet me. He only touched 2 fingers to his wrist. An old signal between flight crews. "Still with you." Daniel's attorney spent 40 minutes discussing my absences from Virginia. Then he displayed enlarged photographs of the medals on a screen. "Colonel Mercer," he said, emphasizing the rank as though it were part of the accusation. "Can you provide an unredacted citation for this decoration?" "No." "Can you name the operation?" "No." "Can you identify the personnel you supposedly rescued?" "Not in open court." Daniel lowered his head, hiding a smile. His attorney turned toward Judge Halpern. "Your Honor, every time we request proof, she invokes secrecy. Conveniently, the public record cannot verify her most dramatic claims." Judge Halpern removed his glasses. He had treated Daniel politely from the beginning. They belonged to the same country club, though Evelyn Shaw's report had made that fact uncomfortable enough for the judge to disclose. He studied the medal Daniel's attorney had placed before him. Then he lifted it between 2 fingers. A quiet laugh escaped him. "People buy these online every day," he said. "Did you really think this court wouldn't notice?" Someone behind Daniel chuckled. I looked past the judge toward Marcus. He had risen halfway from his seat. Before he could speak, the telephone inside Judge Halpern's chambers began to ring. The ringing continued. Judge Halpern looked toward the closed door of his chambers, visibly irritated. His clerk stepped through it a moment later. She was usually composed, the kind of woman who could move 20 case files without bending a corner. Now she held a yellow message slip with both hands. "Your Honor, you need to take this." "I'm in session." "It's the Pentagon, sir. Secure verification desk." No one laughed after that. Judge Halpern set the medal down. He disappeared into his chambers, closing the door behind him. Through the wall, I could hear the low movement of his voice, but not the words. Daniel leaned toward his attorney. "What does that mean?" he whispered. The attorney did not answer. Marcus Vale sat motionless in the back row. His eyes stayed on the black metal case. Less than a minute later, Judge Halpern returned. He was no longer carrying the medal. He took his seat, placed both hands flat on the bench, and looked directly at me. "Colonel Mercer," he said carefully, "the Department of Defense has confirmed that the decoration before this court is authentic." Daniel's attorney stood. "Your Honor, may we ask what documentation?" "No." The single word stopped him. Judge Halpern continued. "The underlying citation remains restricted. The representative would not provide operational details. He did, however, ask me to confirm whether anyone in this courtroom used the name Nightingale." Across the aisle, Daniel stopped smiling. That name had not been spoken in 12 years. And it had never been spoken in front of him. Marcus rose. Not quickly. Not theatrically. He stood with the measured care of a man whose body remembered injuries before his mind admitted them. I did, he said. Judge Halpern looked toward him. Identify yourself for the record. Marcus Vale. Retired Chief Master Sergeant, United States Air Force. Former pararescueman. Daniel's attorney glanced at his notes. You were not listed as a witness by Colonel Mercer. No, Marcus said. I was listed by Robert Mercer. Dad shifted in his wheelchair. His left hand trembled against the armrest, but his eyes were steady. Judge Halpern nodded to the clerk. Mr. Vale, come forward. Marcus walked past me without turning his head. When he reached the witness stand, he raised his right hand and took the oath. Daniel's attorney stood again. Your Honor, we object to testimony involving classified operations. So do I, Judge Halpern said. Mr. Vale will answer only what he is legally permitted to answer. Marcus sat. The clerk entered his identification into the record. Judge Halpern picked up the metal photograph. Did Colonel Mercer earn this? Yes. Were you present? Yes. Can you describe the circumstances? Only in general terms. Proceed. Marcus looked toward the gallery, not at me. 12 years ago, a joint recovery team was trapped beyond a mountain ridgeline during severe weather. They were under fire. Communications were failing. 2 rescue attempts had already been forced back. Daniel's attorney crossed his arms. And Colonel Mercer was the pilot? She was the aircraft commander. The wording mattered. Marcus made sure the room understood it. She was responsible for the aircraft, the crew, and every person we attempted to recover. How many people were rescued? Judge Halpern asked. 11. A faint sound moved through the courtroom. Not applause. Just breath. Daniel looked at me as though I had changed shape. His attorney recovered first. 11 people does not explain why the operation is sealed. No, Marcus said. It doesn't. Then perhaps we are hearing a heroic-sounding story that cannot be tested. Marcus finally turned toward him. The Pentagon tested it before they called. The attorney sat down. Judge Halpern lowered his voice. Why was she called Nightingale? Marcus glanced at me. For the first time that morning, the courtroom disappeared from his face. I saw the younger man strapped to the cabin floor, one hand on a rescue line, snow and smoke moving behind him. When people panic, he said, they listen for the calmest voice. His eyes returned to the judge. Colonel Mercer never raised hers. Not when we lost navigation. Not when the aircraft took damage. Not when command told us the valley was no longer recoverable. Daniel stared at the table. She kept talking to the team on the ground, Marcus continued. She gave them headings. She told them when to move. She told them we were coming back. Judge Halpern looked at the metal case. And did she? Yes. Marcus paused. 3 times. The judge's expression tightened. 3 attempts? 3 entries into the valley. I felt the old pressure building beneath my ribs. The warning tone. The mountain. Elena's voice in my headset. Judge Halpern asked the next question quietly. Were all personnel recovered? Marcus did not answer at once. No, Your Honor. My hands went cold. Daniel looked toward me, perhaps expecting another layer of glory. What came next was not glory. One member of our medical team left the aircraft to reach an injured operator, Marcus said. Conditions deteriorated before she could return. Was Colonel Mercer ordered to leave? Yes. Did she comply? Eventually. The word struck harder than an accusation. Eventually. Marcus looked down at his hands. She held position until our fuel warning became critical. Command issued a direct order to return. If she had stayed longer, everyone aboard would likely have been lost. The courtroom had become too still. I could hear the small electronic hum of the display screen beside Daniel's table. Judge Halpern looked at me. Colonel Mercer, is that why your active operational record ended? I could have said the rest remained classified. I could have let Marcus carry it. That was what Dad had arranged. But Marcus had already carried enough. Yes, I said. My voice sounded distant, even to me. The person we left was Captain Elena Ruiz. She was my flight surgeon. I looked at the flag patch inside the open case. She was also my friend. No one interrupted. For 12 years, people told me the mission saved 11 lives. That was the sentence they used because it was true. I swallowed. But another sentence was true too. I raised my eyes to the judge. I came home without her. The walls seemed to narrow. I forced myself to continue. I accepted the medal because my crew earned recognition. Then I put it in a box because every time I saw it, I remembered the order to leave. Marcus leaned toward the microphone. Claire. It was the first time he had used my name. You did not leave Elena. I looked at him. You obeyed an order that brought the rest of us home. That isn't how it felt. No, he said. It isn't. His voice broke slightly, then steadied. But feelings are not flight records. That sentence opened something inside me I had spent 12 years holding shut. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Just air. Marcus turned toward Daniel. Your sister never told you because she was protecting classified information. She also never told you because she believed surviving made her less worthy of being seen. Daniel's face hardened. You don't know anything about our family. I know your father called me. Marcus reached inside his jacket and removed a sealed envelope. The clerk collected it and carried it to the bench. Judge Halpern examined the front. It bore Dad's handwriting. The judge opened it and read silently. Daniel shifted in his chair. What is that? Judge Halpern looked at Dad. Mr. Mercer, did you write this statement? Dad nodded. Did anyone pressure you? No. The word came out clear. Judge Halpern read aloud. My daughter Claire has never asked me for the farm, my money, or control over my care. Daniel asked me to sign sale papers 4 days after I came home from the hospital. I refused. When he continued, I called Marcus Vale because I knew Daniel would attack the one part of Claire's life she would not defend in public. Daniel stood. That isn't fair. He was medicated when he wrote it. Tanya rose from the row behind Dad. I witnessed it, she said. Evelyn Shaw stood beside her. So did I. Daniel looked from one woman to the other. For the first time, speaking louder did not give him more control. Judge Halpern turned another page. There is also a copy of an independent neurological assessment completed last week. Mr. Mercer has speech impairment and mild short-term memory difficulty. He retains decision-making capacity. Daniel's attorney closed his folder. The judge looked toward Daniel. This court will not appoint you guardian. Daniel opened his mouth. Judge Halpern raised one hand. I'm not finished. He turned to Evelyn Shaw. Your report notes unexplained withdrawals from Mr. Mercer's account and a real estate agreement signed without his authorization. Daniel's face changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. Judge Halpern saw it too. This matter will be referred for financial review. Until then, Mr. Daniel Mercer is prohibited from accessing his father's accounts, property records, or residence without written permission. The courtroom did not erupt. There was no shouting. No one applauded. The power simply left Daniel's side of the room. Quietly. The same way he had always assumed power left mine. Judge Halpern picked up the medal once more. This time, he held it by its edges. Colonel Mercer, he said, I owe you an apology. I looked at him. He waited, perhaps expecting absolution. I did not give it. You owe this court better judgment, I said. His eyes lowered. Yes, he replied. I do. Then I closed the black case. The medal was real. The mission was real. But for the first time, I understood that neither one was the proof I had come to court to protect. Dad's voice was. The financial review took 6 weeks. Daniel had used Dad's power of attorney to move nearly $80,000 into a holding account connected to one of his development partners. He called it an advance for future care. The investigator called it unauthorized self-dealing. The agreement for Ridgeview Estates was canceled. Daniel was ordered to return the money, pay Dad's legal fees, and surrender every key, password, and document connected to the farm. He was not sent to prison. That disappointed some people. It did not disappoint me. I had spent enough of my life believing pain had to be balanced by more pain. Daniel lost what mattered most to him: access, authority, and the ability to control the story. Brooke moved out before Christmas. She left the white curtains behind. I took them down the first morning Dad came home. Tanya helped us arrange for part-time nursing care. Evelyn Shaw connected Dad with an elder law attorney who created a limited support plan rather than a guardianship. Dad kept control of his finances and medical decisions. I was listed as his healthcare proxy only if he became unable to speak for himself. He signed every page slowly. Then he looked at me. Not because Daniel failed, he said. I understood. Because you chose. He nodded. That difference mattered. Daniel called twice during the first month. The first time, he accused me of humiliating him. The second time, he said we should meet privately and put the family back together. I listened until he finished. Then I said, "You can write to Dad. His attorney will review it. I'm talking about us." "So am I." He was quiet. I had once thought boundaries required anger. They did not. Sometimes a boundary was simply a door closed without being slammed. Daniel sent 3 letters. Dad read the first 2 and placed them in a kitchen drawer. The third included an apology, though much of it explained how frightened Daniel had been about medical costs and losing the farm. Dad folded it carefully. "Almost," he said. He did not invite Daniel home. Not then. Forgiveness, I learned, was not the same as reopening access. Marcus came to the farm in January. Snow covered the lower field, and the pond had frozen around the edges. He stood on the porch holding a grocery store pie and looking uncomfortable in civilian clothes. Dad opened the door. "You took your time," he said. Marcus smiled. So did she. We ate dinner at the old oak table. For the first hour, no one mentioned the courtroom, the mission, or Elena. Dad complained about hospital coffee. Marcus described the motorcycle he kept repairing but never rode. I listened to 2 stubborn men argue over whether store-bought pie counted as baking. It felt ordinary. That was why it hurt, and why it helped. After Dad went to bed, Marcus and I sat on the porch beneath 2 wool blankets. Our breath moved white in the air. "I should have called," he said. "So should I." He looked toward the dark field. "Elena's sister has a box for you." My chest tightened. "What kind of box?" "Letters, a few photographs, something Elena recorded before the deployment." I stared at the porch boards. For years, I had imagined Elena's family blaming me. It had been easier than finding out. "I'm not ready," I said. Marcus nodded. "All right." He did not tell me I would regret waiting. He did not tell me healing required courage. He simply sat beside me until the cold became uncomfortable. 3 months later, I called Elena's sister. We spoke for 11 minutes. I cried after 9. In April, the box arrived. I left it unopened on the dining room table for 4 days. On the 5th morning, Dad made coffee, sat across from me, and said nothing. So I opened it. The recording was only 47 seconds long. Elena was laughing because Marcus had burned breakfast again. Then her voice softened. "If Claire ever hears this, tell her she doesn't get to carry everyone forever." I stopped the recording. Dad reached across the table and covered my hand with his. For once, I did not pull away. By summer, we had leased the north field to a local farmer and converted the old equipment shed into a small meeting space for veterans and their families. No plaques, no photographs of medals, just chairs, coffee, and a place where no one had to explain why certain noises stayed with them. Marcus came twice a month. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we repaired fences. Both counted. Daniel did not return to the farm that year. Dad eventually answered one of his letters. He did not excuse what happened. He offered a supervised visit in town, with clear conditions and no discussion of property. Daniel accepted. It was not a reunion. It was a beginning narrow enough to be safe. One evening in September, I found Dad asleep on the porch with a baseball game playing softly on the radio. The blue curtains Mom had sewn moved through the open window behind him. On the table beside his chair sat the black metal case. Closed. I carried it upstairs and placed it in the closet. Not hidden beneath blankets. Not displayed for anyone to admire. Simply stored among the things that belonged to my life but no longer controlled it. Then I went back outside. The sun was dropping behind the field, turning the fence posts gold. Dad woke and asked who was winning. "I don't know," I said. He handed me the radio. We sat there together, listening, until the light was gone. For years I believed silence was the price of keeping peace. I thought strength meant carrying pain without letting it inconvenience anyone else. I thought if I stayed calm, asked for little, and explained nothing, the people who loved me would eventually understand. Some did. Others used the empty space to invent a version of me they could control. Daniel believed my silence proved I had nothing worth saying. Judge Halpern believed missing records meant a false history. Even I had begun to believe the worst moment of my life was the truest thing about me. I was wrong. Elena's loss was part of my story. It was not my entire identity. The medals did not create my worth. The Pentagon's call did not restore it. Marcus's testimony did not make me stronger than I had been the morning before. They only forced other people to see what had already been true. Quiet strength is still strength. But silence should never require us to disappear. Peace does not come from winning every argument or making every person regret how they treated us. Sometimes it comes from closing a metal case, opening a window, and sitting beside someone who finally knows how to listen. My value existed before the courtroom recognized it, and it remained after everyone went home. If this story touched something in you, I hope you remember this. Being quiet does not make you weak, and surviving something painful does not mean you owe everyone an explanation. Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is stop asking the wrong people to recognize our worth. Share this story with someone who may be carrying more than they ever say out loud. Someone who needs the reminder that peace can begin with one honest boundary, one safe person, and one moment of finally being seen. Thank you for spending this time with me.